Hello everyone, Bobbin here. You are watching episode 19 of my modified C-block playthrough in Factorio. And I've made some progress between episodes. I wish I had made more, but I've definitely made some. Let's talk just a little bit about the progress. First of all, let's look at we got all these belts here. And what is all this? Well, we have all these materials on a bus now, and I've got most of the materials that I'm going to need in order to start doing red circuits and doing the blue and the military science. So just going across the belts here, we've got carbon and charcoal, fuel, iron, copper, tin, lead, steel, brown circuits, solder, green circuits, aluminum, gold, and the new ones are Invar, silicon, plastic, brass, an empty one that's going to be for glass, and then I finally broke down, and we're going to have to be using catalysts for our petrochemicals. I've sort of looked through it, and we're going to look at it a little more later today, but we've got to have it. So I've got a belt set up here for the materials for green catalysts, that's silver and aluminum, and a belt here for the materials for red catalysts, that's copper and iron. The other thing that has happened between episodes is I finished a whole bunch of science, and I'm not going to read off the list for the simple reason that it's very simple to describe the science that got done. If we go into the research screen, there is no red-green science left. All of it's done. So we finished all of the red-green science until we get to some of this stuff that's like more in-gamey, like cliff explosives. That has a prerequisite of a military tech, so obviously we can't do it yet. Okay, anything that didn't have a prerequisite, though, that required blue tech or higher, is done. So let's take a look at glass processing. Okay, I'm here on the row of buildings that I've been using for smelting stuff into ingots, and this is where I'm going to set up some of my processing for glass. There are multiple ways to process glass in this mod pack because it's using bobs and angels. Let's talk about the various ways, and then we'll go into this building and we'll set up a glass setup. The most simple method of making glass is simply to melt silicon ore into glass. When you do this, you use 4 silicon ore and you get 3 glass. And as the recipe on the screen shows, this is an excruciatingly slow smelting operation. It takes 10.5 seconds to complete that operation. The other way to do it is to start using some of the Angels processing, and we've already got a lot of infrastructure set up for that, and our silicon ore is all coming up here into the place where it's going to go. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set up, I don't know if it's quite the most complicated method that's available to me right now, but it is a method that's available when you've finished all of your red and green research. We need to go ahead and make something called glass mixture, which is the equivalent of an ingot for the metals processing, except it looks like little bags of cement. It's not really an ingot, obviously, it's a powder. But we've got glass mixture, and you can either make it from silicon directly, or you can make it from silicon and lime. We're going to use the silicon and lime process because that stretches the silicon. I'm having kind of a silicon shortage right now, and I could always pump more bobmonium in to get more silicon, but I'm also having an overabundance of tin a lot of the time, and so that would plug it up and our resource flow would stop. We'd have problems. Okay, so when we have the glass mixture, then we're going to cast it into glass using the casting mechanism for Angel's metallurgy. There are 2 ways available right now for doing this. One is just to cast it directly into glass. This takes molten glass that you get out of an induction furnace, just like we're doing with the metals, and just cast it into glass just like we're using to make metal plates. We're going to use a different process that gives a higher yield. The next process takes molten glass and molten lead, and it produces glass plates and a waste product called lead oxide. The lead oxide can be processed into lead again through a fairly simple process. It's easier than the initial production of lead, actually, but for now it's just going to go into a waste chest and be held. and I will get some processing done with that at some point. So let's go in and see what's involved in making glass mixture. So I'm going to have this building set up here, and I'm sort of planning on also using this building for cement production because the lime that we're going to produce here is also useful for cement. So let me set up some buildings to do that. I'm going to need to produce lime first, since I know I'm going to need that. So let's see if we can set up some of these washers to produce lime. For the moment, I'm not going to worry about the mud water. We're not going to have trouble producing it. But let me just put the machine down. The first one makes heavy mud water, and it also generates hydrogen sulfide. I think here I'm just going to vent the hydrogen sulfide. But if we come over here, let's see, the viscous comes in here and the heavy comes in here. We've got to have water on one side. Oh, so complicated. I need to figure out where I want these inputs, and I think this will suffice. So the output's on the bottom there. That's going to go into the next one, and it's going to get converted into concentrated mud water. I've got to have it rotated that way, so water's still on this side. Then we're going to come through it again, and we're going to make it into light mud water. And that's got to go like that. And light mud water can come out and be produced into limestone. So that's going to go like that. Oh, it's already taken up a lot of space. Okay, so I'm going to need to get heavy mud water in here and water in there. And one of the things I discovered about these buildings in the interaction with the water fill mod is that you can place water in these buildings. So I don't actually need to use electric power to pump out water. So let's go ahead and put some water down here in the corner so that I can get my pumps going. I'm going to need a regular water pump and a seafloor pump. You know, I've got a spare one of those in a box, and I don't want to create another one right now, so let me cut and get that, and I'll be right back. I'm back, and I have my pumps placed. I did have to expand the water area just a little bit more than I had initially planned on in order to get it in there. Not really a problem. So let's hook these up. We can go just like that, and I'll tell you what, why don't we just go all the way across here for that one, just like that. Okay, and I need to get water to all of them, not just this one. It is busily producing mud now. Let's go down and don't need belts, I need pipes. Get the water all the way down. And I missed a pipe. One more. There we go. Did I didn't. Good. Okay, so sulfur dioxide is going to be a problem over here. I can refine it into sulfur at some point. I don't think at this point I want to set that up that way. Let's just go ahead and use a flare to get rid of it. Just like so. And I also need to do something with the mud. Unfortunately, you can't flare mud. So let's take and put a belt up here and an assembling machine and just make it all into landfill. And yeah, we'll just do it that way. Assembling machine, where are you? Got a bunch of them. All these assembling machines are from where I torn down the plastic, and we're probably going to go over there and look at the plastic again in just a minute when I get the glass done. That's going to be, I've got it all set up and working, but I'm going to have to expand it and change it just a little bit more. Okay, so I didn't want limestone on this one. So here we want to make landfill out of mud. Where is it? I've seen it so many times now. Sand. There we go, and this will accumulate if I don't put it somewhere, so let's just go ahead and pop down a chest. I'll put it right there, And then I'm going to do a little trick with the inserter. We're using Bob's adjustable inserters. It's part of the C-Block mod pack normally. It's not something I've added. Now, if we hit Shift E here, we can tell it where to pick up, and I'm going to tell it to pick up right here. So it's going to be a right angle insertion. That's a nice way of doing a lot of compact builds, and you're probably going to see something in a couple of minutes that does demonstrate it, not part of this glass setup. The lime we've actually got to have going the other direction. I think I'll just cut that belt short, and we'll come down here. To make lime, I've got to have a blast furnace, so we'll put that there, and we're just going to shovel all of this stuff in here, and we are making lime. Let me get what's in my inventory out of here so I don't have to worry about it. Okay, we've got to put in another flare stack, this time to get rid of carbon dioxide, and we're going to need fuel for this machine. I've already run the fuel line all the way through the building, like all of them. So let's go ahead and put in a splitter there, and a loader here, and hook it all up. And hopefully we'll be getting lime now. So yes, we're getting lime. We're throwing away a bunch of stuff at the moment. I might eventually recover the sulfur. This is so far from anywhere where carbon dioxide is useful that I'll probably just leave that venting forever. Now, this side over here, probably cement production in the future. This side over here, glass today. So I need, in order for this glass to work, I'm going to need a new machine that I haven't used before, in this playthrough anyway, called a powder mixer. And it's got a recipe for making glass mixture. It also is involved in cement, and I guess we did use it earlier because we used it to make aluminum hydroxide. Okay, so I stand corrected on that, but I haven't used it for glass in this episode. So we've got silicon coming in here, and for the moment I have got a lot of extra accumulating in a chest. I don't have very much silicon coming in, so I did decide to go ahead and accumulate a little there before starting the episode. We're going to make this glass mixture that uses lime. So we're filling up with silicon, and we need to fill up with lime next. So I'll just go ahead and pull this out here. There will be plenty of extra for cement when we need it, so I'm not worried that I'm just using a loader and pulling it directly. And we are now making glass mixture, just like that. Now when we get to more advanced glass recipes, I'm thinking that this will be helpful because I can use some of this additional area. I'm not 100% sure I'm going to do that, but having the extra area is kind of nice. So just to line this up correctly, it's got to come here. And we'll pull that out, and we'll run it up and out the back. Alright, let's go back outside and take a look. So out here I have already set this up and hooked it up onto the merry-go-round with all the ingots. These are effectively glass ingots, even if it's a powder product. We can see that some are flowing down the belt here, and if we come up here, there is a spot reserved for it up top, right here, and no, right here I think. None has come through just yet. Oh, it's not connected all the way. I had to put a kink in the belt here, and I didn't finish it. Let me do that now. Basically, I wasn't going to have room to get around everything, so I had to move my belt location just a little bit. So we've got glass coming up, and it's going on here. And it's also being pulled off in another location, I think over here. And so once it makes its way around, we'll take a look at the smelting operation for it. I have glass mixture coming in on the belts. Let's take a look at this operation because it's more complicated than all of our other casting operations. This one, the glass mixture is going to come into this induction furnace, and it's going to be made into molten glass. Separately, we have lead coming into this induction furnace, and it's being melted into molten lead. Both the lead and the glass are being fed into casting machines, and the casting machines are combining the molten glass and the molten lead to produce glass and lead oxide. The lead oxide is just getting pulled out. It's using right angle inserters here again to pull it directly out into a chest where it's just going to sit there. The other interesting thing that's going on here with inserters, by the way, is that this one is configured as a near inserter, whereas this one's normal. So it'll use both sides of the belt on the output. All of these are set up that way for the most part. When that gets done, the lead oxide will just accumulate in this iron chest for the time being. I will have to come pick it up when I get ready to do something with it. And something I do will just be to stick it in a blast furnace and make it straight back into lead ingots and put them back on the belt. So let's take and hook up the belts and see what happens. Something isn't right. What's not happening? We've got our glass in there. We've got our casting here. It's all powered. Maybe it wants something just a little... Oh, it has specific inputs for these things, and I am not following the guidelines. Let's see which one, if I can tell which ones are which. You know, I really can't. It looks like maybe this one is the lead and the other two can be glass. That's going to be vexing. Let me see if I have to rearrange this and get it. In the meantime, I will go ahead and cut this off. And we'll see if I can get something going here. Be right back. Okay, I have everything working now. I had to rearrange everything quite a bit here. I also needed to add some filter inserters. Basically, the lead needs to come in on one side and the glass on the other in order to get this to work. And I sort of had it that way, but I hadn't allowed for which corners allow which inputs. And of course, it's always the ones that you didn't want. Now, I didn't lose any glass or anything because I was able to just rotate these machines to input the fluids to get everything to go through. So that wasn't any real loss. I don't want to lose glass because I'm a little short on silicon. That's the only reason to think of it in that way. But here we go. Let's start inputting again and see what happens. Okay, so we have glass coming out on the line, and we have lead oxide. If I turn this off so we can see a little better, we have lead oxide going into a chest and piling up here. And it looks like it's going to pile up pretty quickly, so I should probably upgrade that chest to something just a little bigger so that it will buy me some time before I have to come fix it. The other thing in this area that I want to show is this setup right here that says pipe. I've been using copper pipes extensively throughout the base, and I have also been using steel pipes where I needed a little bit longer reach. And that works out okay. The problem is there are certain materials that I have too much of that I'd like to use up, and so I sort of decided to go with the bronze pipes going forward. And the reason is because the bronze pipes have the same reach as steel, which is not the longest reach of any pipe, but it's a pretty long reach. It's longer than copper. And it will use materials that I have in abundance. Steel, it takes a bit more materials. This is more material efficient than steel. It has the longer reach. I suppose if you come under attack, it has more durability. I don't think that's anything going to be interesting here. But this uses bronze. The particular bronze recipe that I'm using uses copper, nickel, and tin in the proportions of 18:6:12. So this will allow me to use up some extra tin. It will allow me to use up some extra nickel. Nickel is something I have in huge abundance, and I have no idea how I'm going to use it all anytime soon. There may be something at some point, but the only thing it's being used for really is Invar plates. That's the only thing it's going to be used for that goes into production anytime soon. I think eventually it makes an alloy with titanium that's useful. We'll see. I just don't see using a lot of nickel anytime soon, and it does pile up because it comes out of the sorting. So for now, some of it's going to get converted into pipes, and that also takes care of some tin and some copper. Let's look at the other project today. Let's look at plastic. So this build you're looking at right now is really sort of the same plastic setup that I had before, except that it's been rotated around and all of that stuff with the trees has been removed because I'm not using logs to make plastic. That's too slow, requires too much energy, too many materials. This is a little faster. It's still only running one plant, but it can run that plant at full speed and it's not going to run out of wood. The principal differences are I've changed the chemical plant that's producing methanol to produce it through catalytic synthesis. So we're using this line of aluminum and silver to make catalyst, the green catalyst specifically, that goes into the chemical plant that produces methanol. The methanol then is really just doing exactly the same thing it was in the other build, except it's not coming from that huge wood setup, it's coming from just one chemical plant. The other thing that's happened here that's a little different is I was flaring off the residual gas this makes. This produces residual gas in addition to the propene that's needed for plastic. And instead of just flaring it off, I'm now combining it with some of the base mineral oil that's coming out of the fuel production to make lubricant, because we're going to need lubricant for flying robots, actually anything that uses electric motors. So that's sort of what's going on with this plant, but I do want to change it a little bit. I've got it built and I've shown it to you, but I'm going to change it just a little bit so to make it a little bit more flexible. One of the things that I'm also going to need to produce besides plastic, and this is the reason why I gave up on not using catalysts, is I've got to produce resin. And if we look at the recipe for resin that is available to us, we have to produce liquid resin. Basically, resin comes from liquid resin. Liquid resin, we have a few recipes for. One of them is this bioresin that comes from trees and farming. And I really don't think that this is implemented the way that it needs to be. Producing two bioresin in 4 seconds gives you 5 liquid resin out. That's going to make just a piece of a, let's see here, you got to have 40 to make resin. So that's basically half a resin, that 5. It makes half of a piece of resin. And the raw bioresin takes forever to make in one of these tree farms. That's an excruciatingly slow combine. And so there's just no practical way to do this using the trees. And so I kind of think that the timing on the tree one is bugged a little bit. I could be wrong on that. That could be the intent to make it unusable, but I'm not sure why anyone would do that. Okay, the other method that's available to us right now, I think, is this one that uses urea gas and formaldehyde gas. We'll come back to it in just a minute. There's also a recipe that uses melamine and formaldehyde. That one may be a little more efficient or a little faster. Yes, that one's twice as efficient. It uses a tech that we don't have. Similar, this one that uses bisphenol A and epichlorohydrin. Returning to the urea and the formaldehyde, urea is something that I did a setup for earlier, and urea requires hydrogen because you've got to do ammonia, and it requires a red metal catalyst. It's used for fertilizer in addition to this, so I want to have the ability here near the tree farm to make fertilizer just in case I decide to upgrade my tree recipes at some point. Where are we going here? Here we go. So that's a possibility here. I'm going to have to make the urea, and by putting it here, I have it available for the trees if I want to use it for trees as well as resin. The formaldehyde comes from methanol gas, which is the same gas we're using as input on the plastic production. It uses a green metal catalyst to convert methanol gas into formaldehyde. It looks like that's the only recipe for formaldehyde. So multiple recipes that use catalysts, and that's a little bit of an issue. That basically means that I must use catalysts to produce these components, and I must produce these components in order to progress to blue science. So basically you have to have catalysts, and more particularly that means you're going to have silver, which comes from sorting crotinium chunks. So you've got to have ore washing set up. I already had that, thankfully, so that's not really a problem. But just keep that in mind. There are several requirements here you've got to go through. Now I'm going to set this up inside a building so I can relocate it better and so I can tinker with it a little bit more without having to worry about the outside. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to plop down this building. And I'll hit R to show the inputs and outputs. I'm going to basically be moving this piece, which is these three machines right here, and probably take up the water. I'm going to be moving that inside the building. So let me go ahead and grab those. It always works best if you grab the inserters first, and it always works best if you remember that, and I seldom do. The steam probably needed to stay outside because the steam is not being used inside. Let me go ahead and put that back out here. And let's see. Where'd that go? That went this way, didn't it? Okay, so I'll go ahead and put the pump back down too. And I've got to get all the power hooked back up on this because I pulled the power pole. Alright, it's just a comedy of errors sometimes. Alright, there we go. Now inside this building I'm going to need hydrogen. So let me pick that up and I will run hydrogen in... Yeah, I think I'm going to put it in the side here because it's going to be used for two operations. And I'll probably clean up the pipes later. For now, I think that will suffice. Alright, so this coming down here is carbon dioxide, and I'm going to need that too. So let's run that in a pipe in the side. Can't do it there because that's going to intersect. Let's maybe just come out a little ways here and do a slightly convoluted arrangement like this. This is the thing that I deeply dislike about pipes in Factorio is all of this stuff, and you've got to worry about the intersections on them rather than being able to control the way they connect. The only way to avoid connections is to use these undergrounds or to just make sure that they're all spaced out. So I'm going to have these as inputs in here. Let me come inside. Maybe put a power pole a little closer to this thing so we've got power. Then come inside. Alright, so I have fluids coming in here, and these are both inputs. I'm going to start with the methanol and get it working. The methanol requires both of these inputs, and I'm going to set up two of the factories that produce it here, two of the chemical plants. And I want to set it up so that I can expand it just a little bit. So let's go ahead and put these down and see if I can get these gases over to it without a nightmare scenario. So we're going to hook it up there, and we're going to hook it up there. And we have to see which gas goes where. Thankfully, in this case, it won't matter too much. Catalytic synthesis to methanol. So carbon dioxide comes in this side, and hydrogen comes in this one. So let's run our hydrogen up to there. Like that. And our carbon dioxide will go in here. I don't think I'm going to do that. Let's just bring that across and bring the hydrogen in as well. So we now have this hooked up all the way through there in both machines. I need to get the catalysts into these machines, and I have to get them back out as well. I don't think they use the catalysts all that fast, and there are typically a whole bunch of them. So maybe I can just circulate catalysts around. Let me think how I want to do that. I'd probably like to have a single catalyst making system here and run them on a belt back and forth so that the let's see, I think I can do it. Maybe don't have to put it too far apart. Let's say that the output catalysts go over here. the ones that are output from the factory, the charged ones, they go like that. And I will cut this off here because I don't need the whole length of the belt. And the input ones come back here. And that belt will be fine there. So in order to get them in and out doing that, what I'm going to have to do, the time on this is how many seconds? 2. So we're okay with regular inserters. So we're going to get our catalyst in up here. And our catalyst out over here. And I will have to set the distance on the inserters to the appropriate amount. The in were fine, but to get them out of this machine, I'm going to need to put it onto that belt right there. So we'll do that. And to get them, the discharged ones back in here, the spent catalyst, I'll put that there. And this is going to be kind of a weird little inserter trick maybe. Well, I'll tell you what, I'll put it here. We won't be so weird as to have them picking up in just ridiculous places. And the input is fine, but the pickup needs to be over here. So it's going to pick up on the end of that belt and put it in here. And this is going to be making green metal catalyst because that's what's required here. Empty catalyst frames come back here, they go into here, they get charged back up, and they go out there. Just to leave a little space to pick it up, I'm going to take and move this inserter here. And so the output comes down there. This is going to have to be a long output. The same for this one. And I think we're set up for where all these things have to move around. So we're kind of good on that. I'm going to have to get the metals in from outside. So let me go do that. I've run my metals in from outside, and I've sort of wound them around through here against the wall. I'm trying to leave as much space as possible for future expansion. Plus, I know I want to have urea production down here on the bottom. I got this hooked up. I did have to move some of these inserters because I had blocked both of my outputs on this machine, and clearly I can't do that. We got our stuff coming through here, and I am going to now set up an inserter here, and we'll do a right angle inserter and we'll tell it to pick up there. So this one will start loading this machine. Let me put some catalysts in the output there, see if this stuff fires up. And it does. So we're producing methanol and we have it ready to output. Let's hook up some pipes and get it down here where it needs to go for output. I don't think I want to run it quite that far because I need to leave space at the bottom. But we'll go ahead and run it down here. And then I will run a pipe along the wall to gather it all up. Alright, so methanol should be in that pipe and ready to exit here. And it's going to come out right here. And this is the methanol gas pipe here. So let's just take and hook up here and here. And we're done with methanol on this side. Now I'm probably also going to run it out the other side of the building for the use of the production of the resin when I get ready for it. I'm not quite ready for that. So we've got our methanol inside a building here. We've actually got 2 chemical plants producing it, so we can operate at a higher capacity if we need to. And it's sort of set up in a way that is recognizably useful for expansion because I can just take and build out along here. I might need to get more catalyst frames in here. Let's just go ahead and put some in. So we should have some extra catalyst floating around here. I may need to add more frames just to get enough to completely fill the belt to make sure that we're not short at some point. But I think we're kind of good there for the moment. So I think that's going to be it for this episode. I'm going to go ahead and set up the rest of the resin production in this building, and I'll be ready to show it to you in episode 20. For now, I think we're done, and thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.